Call the meeting to order. Welcome, everybody. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I need a motion to adopt the agenda. We have no need to go into executive session.
Make that motion.
No, we've got a roll call first. I'm sorry.
I'll take
I
that back.
jumped. Sorry, roll call. I almost skipped that.
Mr. Finkel.
Here.
Mr. Hayes.
Here.
Mr. Bergstresser.
Here.
Mr. Netto. Here. Mr. Rosenthal.
Here.
Robert Smolin.
Here.
Robert Leslie.
Here.
Robert Fulton.
Here.
John Hodgson. Here. Stephanie Rozicki.
Here.
Richard Ferrari. Here.
Thank you. Now I need a motion to adopt the agenda.
Still make the motion.
I'll second that motion.
Okay. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Well, we're gonna add this.
Did anybody send, I didn't get a sheet. Did anybody send a public comment? What?
Of course I did.
Okay. Please.
Mr. Netto, were you the second on that? Oh, Mr. Rosenthal.
okay.
Thank you.
You're on.
I actually want to comment on the grievance part of it. Is not the-
Yeah, that's where we're pretty much there.
Pretty much there? Okay. Again, my name is Phil Hathaway. I'm a Lewis County legislator, and I would like to speak to you one more time about our assessment that you've applied to us. I kind of would like to give you a little insight of why we're so sensitive about this type of issue, and our sensitivity, it really comes, particularly mine, comes from the state's unfunded mandates. 90% of our tax levy is an unfunded mandate. And we have to have a jail. They tell us how to run it. We spend $4.5 million. They don't give us anything. New York State's one of only 5 states that make the counties share in the Medicaid costs. That costs us $5 million. We have no input whatsoever on who's eligible and all that. And I know you guys know all this, but I'm trying to give you a little basis of where I'm coming from. And again, we have no input on this $5 million for Medicaid. And supposedly, in addition to that, the state was going to take over full administration of that by 2015. So in anticipation of that, they took away some of the administration money that we were getting. Obviously, this is going into 2017. They haven't taken over like 5% of the administration, but they still kept the money. So, it really is a frustrating thing for us. And it's kind of, in my mind, I kind of parallel it to this situation because we had no input into the budget, and all of a sudden, here it was. And it was kind of like a really big lack of communication because when we first found out about it was when you told us it was going to cost Lewis County $19,294 a year. Excuse me. So that obviously that was kind of frustrating, particularly in view of the fact that it would have affected 2016, 17, and 18, which was the current year's budget that obviously nothing was in there for. And like with our budget this year for the 17 budget, as I kind of alluded to before, our senators said it was imperative that we make our 2% tax cap because of the rebates that our taxpayers were going to get by us making that tax cap. So our county manager went back through the budget for about the 10th time, and I think I told you before we're going to have 3 pages of adjustments, but we didn't. We only had 2. We had to adjust 46 different accounts to get down to that tax cap because of our taxpayers. But that's what we did. We made it fit. And I think another part of my frustration is us putting in the monitoring stations. We being Lewis County, of our cash, has spent $57,000 putting in those monitoring stations on the Black River. And in addition to that, we spent 472 hours of time doing that, which equals another $18,275. So we've got $75,000 invested in these monitoring systems, which it seems to me like would be the function of the district, the regulating district, or at least it's a benefit for the regulating district. In addition to that, we applied for and got a $15,000 grant, and Assemblyman Blankenbush gave us $5,000 as well. So we've got $95,000 into monitoring systems, and it does not seem to me like the board is acknowledging that financially with us. I mean, our cash outlay is $75,000, is almost 4 times what the $19,294 you want to charge us each year, but it doesn't, excuse me, it doesn't seem like it's being financially acknowledged, and actually it's more than the total annual. It was $66,000 for all the districts, and it's frustrating to me. I think I kind of alluded to you last time, but had you come to us and said, we've got this situation, we lost the lawsuit, we've got to make up revenues, and this is coming to you down the pike. If you'd have said something to the effect, we acknowledge that you have put in these monitoring stations, which is an assist to us, but we still need more revenues, and in 2018, you're going to start having to pay the revenues. Because I understand you're doing it legally. Yeah, I understand that. But sometimes the legal thing isn't the right thing either. But if we'd have had an opportunity to plan for this, it would have been a lot more palatable to us, and it would have been easier for us, actually. And I guess that's, I do want to say one thing. I do appreciate the fact that you guys let us say what we think. Well, what I think, I guess. And you don't seem to take anything personally, and that's good, because this is just business, you know. But it's good of you guys to let us just speak out and say what we think, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
We are on that part of the, I know after the last meeting, we were concerned about some of the things you said, and I had some discussions with council, and I had some discussions with our executive director, and we've tried to make some payment arrangements and so forth, but I know staff is recommending that we approve the apportionment as it stands, and I'm open for board discussion on this.
Well, so if we approve, which I think that's what staff recommends, but how about, is there any way we can defer these payments for a year, or spread it out so it doesn't cause a financial?
We have offered that.
Okay. Is that in
We have offered
discussions?
that.
Is that viable?
The apportionment would be setting assessments for all of the beneficiaries. The payment of those assessments, the timing of receipt of the payment of those assessments is not an apportionment issue as much as a collection issue. And we've expressed to those beneficiaries that would benefit from, for instance, paying this assessment in their 2017 fiscal year, if they're on a calendar year, we can accept those payments after the first of this year. Those that have paid or are clamoring to pay in 2016 in order to make those payments something that they can write off against their 2016 income. We're also, by finalizing the apportionment at today's meeting, making that possible for them. I think we're in a position financially where we don't have to spend the first dollar of everybody's assessment at the same time. If somebody needs to push that assessment payment back a little, Lewis County, for instance, if they're better able to pay that towards the middle of their fiscal year, we're at a position where we can accept that at that time. We recognize that somewhere down the road, everybody's going to have two of these in one fiscal year.
And that was explained to all the beneficiaries?
Yes.
Okay, because that's what I was told we would do
Right.
when I was given the three options.
And it ran the gamut from, yeah, we're going to pay it today, to
Personally went out
we
to
need time.
visit
Right.
all of the county
I got one
officials.
email back on your visit.
Can I have a motion to accept, or, can I have a motion on the reapportionment?
So,
Wait a minute, are we at that?
Yeah, we are.
Well, I'll make a motion.
Board hearing, board discussion, board action.
Okay.
there's a,
Unless there's more discussion, I'm sorry, we didn't mean to cut off discussion.
we have a draft resolution actually either way, but before you is a draft resolution to approve the apportionment without modification.
Is that in our package other than on paper?
No, I think we hand carried one copy of going each way. We have several copies of it.
All right.
Got another one?
And it basically recites how we got to where we are, that the board adopted a apportionment back in July of 2016. It was served. We determined what the total costs are. We established the amount chargeable to the state. We tried to avoid the potential for disparate treatment by setting the public corporations as the counties. We showed each public corporation a brief description of each of the parcels of real estate, noting essentially that those, as an editorial comment, those parcels of real estate are basically the hydropower companies. We determined the amount to be paid by each. The majority of the members have viewed those public corporations and parcels of real estate benefited. Basically, you've seen the list, you know what you're sending things to. We did get approval from DEC. We set an apportionment grievance hearing, which we started November 9th and continued today. DEC did approve it. We received the letter on August 15th. They've held an apportionment grievance hearing. On the second page there, it says October 12th, but actually it should be November 9th and continued December 13th. And then therefore be it resolved that the apportionment is approved without modification. And as approved would be final and conclusive, basically a final agency action pursuant to statute. The next level of appeal is to the court system.
Okay.
Any questions?
No.
Do we have a motion?
I'll move that the board resolve to approve the Black River area apportionment without modification that was adopted by the board at the July 12, 2016 meeting, and entitled State of New York Hudson River Black River Regulating District Stillwater Old Forge 6 Lake Hawkinsville operation and maintenance costs and apportionment of operation and maintenance costs. Again, that's the title, apportionment of the district without modification.
Is there a second to that?
I will
motion?
second that motion as recited by Mr. Neto.
Is there any further discussion?
I have none.
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion is carried. Next, I need the approval of the November 9th board meeting minutes.
Make that motion.
Second?
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So approved. Report of the executive director.
Good morning, everyone, and guests. Just a report, on my report on page 50, we did do follow-on analysis for the Black River apportionment, including visits to the counties that were made over the course of the month. One thing I wanted to note very specifically for the board, at the Stillwater Reservoir Operating Agreement with Mercer Companies concludes at the end of this month, and there's a 5-year contract extension that's in the contract sort of thing. We've held discussions with the principals of the company, and right now we're at the point where we're going to exercise that 5-year contract extension. I believe it's favorable to the district because of the 3% escalator that goes along with it, the payment from running the hydro turbine at the dam itself sort of thing. And the company, we will then go into a longer-term negotiating posture with them over a potential 15-year extension of their contract. They've come to us with some information, but they haven't come completely, and we are going to continue that negotiation. But it looks to me, here we are on December 13th, that by December 31st, we are not going to have a renegotiated 15-year contract. So therefore, the 5-year extension, which I believe is favorable to the district, will go into effect. And that's something provides us at this point, Rick, about $70,000 of operating income per year from the facility at Stillwater. Secondly, I met with, acknowledging Mr. Smith from the Sacandaga Protection Committee. I met with a representative in Albany to talk about the issues that are going on around the Great Sacandaga Lake. Also had good discussions at the Association of Adirondack Towns and Villages with both DEC and APA representatives about issues of interest to the DEC at the state level, and would note that the Boreas Ponds land classification issue is absorbing, along with the Hoosick Falls water issues, are absorbing a lot of attention of senior officials in DEC at this point. Thirdly, checked specifically with the Governor's Office of Appointments about the nominations for the Black River opening and Hudson River openings. They are in the final stages, if you will, of approval, background checks, fingerprints, those sorts of investigations. So the ball is clearly in the governor's court to go ahead and act on those nominations for appointment to the board. And I am not certain, they won't tell me when we would expect for those 2 nominations to actually come out of the system. But I hope it to be soon, and I'll continue to press them for action. Fourthly, Saratoga County officials, we met with them regarding the historical documentary about the Great Sacandaga Lake, the construction of the reservoir. We opened our archives to that organization. They also suggested that when they have the premiere of the film, that we may have it and host it at the district office in Sacandaga for kind of an opening for the documentary that they're doing. And lastly, and quite importantly, the memorandum of agreement between the district and the CSEA local was signed on November 22nd by myself, along with the union president and the CSEA representative. And I ask that be brought to the board's attention for ratification of that contract at this meeting today. I also want to note suggested dates and locations on page 51 for the meeting schedule for next year. A couple things worthy of note. the June meeting. We have a marker out there for potentially holding the meeting in Indian Lake, which has been a desire to do for some time. And the October meeting in Stillwater has been carefully scrubbed. It will be likely on a Thursday in the month of October at the Stillwater Reservoir offices. So pending the board's questions, that concludes my report.
Very good.
Let's do
So
that.
do you have that? I didn't bring it.
I'll do that.
Do you have a motion or
No,
a resolution for that CSEA matter?
Yeah, we have to, I was just gonna ask for a motion to approve the CSEA contract.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Mr. Rosenthal,
Aye.
Mr. Bergstresser.
Any further discussion on that?
Yes, I'm glad it's done.
Yeah. Very glad it's done. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Is there a resolution somewhere in our package?
We do have a resolution, and we will memorialize
Perform.
that.
Okay.
And that will be provided, the MOU will turn into the actual detailed
That's fine.
agreement, which we will then bring to the board in January.
I was just looking through
Yeah.
my electronic
Yeah.
file, which is a little more
Yeah, pretty
arduous.
much the details we had looked at.
Okay.
No changes
Yeah,
from,
no changes.
I believe my
Uh,
copy of that resolution is sitting on the
contracts.
cookie tray.
Resolution to approve the Second Amendment to Contract C, and all that stuff. Mr. Fulton.
Yeah, I believe it's on page 52. That's related to Indian Lake Dam's engineering assessment and continued recommendations for remedial measures. The Phase 2 portion of the greater project, development of dam improvement alternatives. Brief overview, back in April 2014, we awarded work for the engineering assessment to Bergman. During 2015 completed the safety inspection, the first engineering assessment, went to DEC, and presented to the board in 2016, January 2016, recommendations and conclusions developed. And in April 2016, staff presented a summary of the dam safety and maintenance compliance issues. And in June 2016, board accepted staff recommendation to use Bergman to complete the additional engineering studies necessary to correct those safety compliance issues. And the board also authorized at that time staff to seek a scope of work and fee proposal. So attached in the memorandum is Bergman's proposal for that next phase, the Phase 2 development of dam improvement alternatives. Bergman proposes to evaluate and develop 2 or 3 alternatives to address the needed dam improvements and come up with the best method for remediation and to bring the facility into compliance with DEC dam safety regulations. This contract amendment will include a scope of work and fee associated with a base scope. And there's about 4 or 5 tasks within the scope that's attached to the memorandum. But it also includes some additional optional tasks, which would be completed based on the findings of those first 4 or 5 tasks. And certainly it's explained in detail, but short story is if we complete some very abbreviated assessment, it'll let us know whether or not we need to move forward with a more detailed further assessment concerning the hydraulics of the facility. And if based on the abbreviated assessment, it does not look beneficial, then we won't have to spend that additional money. So rather than just diving into the more detailed study, we're gonna
No pun intended, diving in.
yes, no pun intended. All right. The staff recommends acceptance of Bergman's proposal, seeks board authorization by resolution to amend the scope of work for the contract C03-2013 to include the base tasks and to increase the project budget by $119,890 to a total contract price of $298,466, and seeks authorization for the executive director to execute the amendment to the contract. And I'm happy to take any questions.
I have some concerns.
Sure.
My concerns are particularly with regard to the optional task fee.
Yep.
And with regard to the broader picture that we've had a roughly $200,000 contract to now we're adding
Sure.
33%.
Yep.
Who's driving the train here?
The DEC regulations are driving the train.
Well, it's easy to say the DEC regulations are driving the train. I understand that. I'm not trying to be flippant.
Sure.
My concern is you've got a consultant who has been given $200,000+ and is now coming back and saying, well, our job isn't quite complete and we're going to request another $119,000, and we're alerting you to the fact that we may, Bergman, discover some things that we're now going to add options for another 94,000 and change.
Well, let me.
I think as a board, we have to question where's the end of this.
Sure. Well, let me go back into some detail. It's, the engineering assessment is a specific set of, well, based on a specific set of guidelines provided by DEC. It defines exactly what the engineer is supposed to look at, evaluate in terms of hydraulic capacity, in terms of the elements of this project and their structural capacity, stability, the ability for the site to pass a particular flow, a particular storm event. And in the case of Indian Lake, there is not an adequate amount of spillway capacity to safely discharge the flow. The DEC says and mandates that we must pass. In addition to that, there are some stability issues, again, based on the regulations and the industry practice with regard to how you evaluate the structures themselves. So one can just immediately remediate and pay whatever it costs to remediate, or in the case, and similar to what we did at Hawkinsville, you can move into additional hydraulic studies, which DEC will accept. Similar to FERC will accept at FERC-regulated sites, additional engineering studies. At Indian Lake and with the DEC, and after having conversations with the DEC, they will entertain the possibility of site-specific hydrologic and hydraulic evaluations, which will more precisely define that flow that it must pass safely. The advantages of doing that site-specific analysis is that you can bring down both lower the flow as well as the elevation. By lowering both of those, you get closer to being able to pass that flow safely without modification. And by lowering the elevation of the head pond under those conditions, you may be able to avoid having to remediate for structural instability because you reduce the amount of load that's on the structure. You can, and one of the options in the optional task is the full applied weather science. That's $75,000. That's the full effort of site-specific evaluation. But Applied Weather has done other studies. In particular, they did a study at Sacandaga, which evaluated in a similar fashion whether or not the flow, based on site-specific evaluation, could be reduced. So, Bergman's
Can
going to...
I stop you just,
Yeah.
what is site-specific evaluation?
Site-specific, well, the approach that you use, again, in the industry is a kind of a generic storm event to create the flow that comes into the facility.
Okay.
It's based on regional or even national occurrences of storms.
Okay.
How they generally move into an area, their orientation,
It's a computer
how large they
generated.
are. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's generalized.
Right.
And it's accepted that it's generalized. That's the practice. Mainly because to do it specifically on a site costs a significant amount of money. There are agencies at the federal level that have studied the storms and provide that data so that locally, folks like us or private dam owners can take that generalized event, apply it to their facility, and get a generalized calculation of the flow.
Right.
A site-specific flow calculation is the storms that come to your area, basically. The storms historically that have hit a particular watershed, and you evaluate those storms just for your watershed and develop a similar calculation, a similar
More precise.
yeah, well, yes, it is more precise, but it's a similar storm event, but with,
But it's specific to
localized
that one dam.
information.
But how, if at all, is one methodology better or worse than utilizing the other methodology?
Well, because they are generalized. That's the first approach that we always take is using that generalized storm event.
Did we do that?
Yes, yeah, that's what,
That was phase
that
one.
is what's required as part of the engineering assessment the DEC requires.
So we paid $200,000 for them to do a generic generalized assessment.
That's correct.
And they
That's the-
concluded that we need a site-specific analysis after that.
Well, no, that's being driven by the staff.
Okay.
Because if I do
So,
if
and
I
I'm
do
comfortable with that.
75,000
You were not satisfied that that generalized assessment got us to where we need to be.
I think, it sounds to me more like we're gonna roll the dice with a site-specific to see if the remediation cost would be less.
Well, that's the ultimate goal,
That's...
is to bring the costs down. Or, like in the case of
Is that a
Hawkins.
good definition of it?
Not
Well,
rolling the dice.
Let's just, let me
Right.
use
That's correct.
Hawkinsville as an example,
Okay.
remind you. In
Right.
Hawkinsville, we were faced with DEC regulation of having to pass 70,000 cubic feet per second at Hawkinsville. And we got the design flow down to, as a result of Kleinschmidt doing additional calculations, down to 21,000 CFS. The
Significant difference.
difference in structure is enormous.
And the resultant cost.
We would have been spending $5 to $10 million
Okay.
to improve Hawkinsville instead of the $1 million as a result of the couple $100,000 that we spent to do the study with Klein.
Argument being that it's money well spent to
Well
do the
spent.
specific.
Right.
Okay,
So
see, that's
what-
answering
what
a
per-
lot of the concerns that I have.
Yeah, the other thing is that, these folks don't put together their proposal without a lot of fine-tooth comb by myself, Mike Mosier, executive director, and the rest of our staff. We direct them entirely on those tasks.
Okay.
And so much so that, and I let them know up front, you're not just the consultant, I treat you like you're part of my department. You're gonna put this together exactly the way we want the scope to be. It's not just they throw it together and we take it and that's it. This one in particular, we separated out the optional work so that we wouldn't have to approve a higher contract amount until we needed to. And I'm just looking for the first, so getting back to the site-specific as compared to the generalized, and the generalized is accepted industry practice. That's the approach you take with every facility, rather than diving into the generalized, and into the site-specific. So if we spend looks like the $20,000 or so on the abbreviated or the preliminary hydraulic analysis, and that work will actually include taking the other site-specific analysis that have been done locally, regionally, across the Adirondacks, like Great Sacandaga Lake, and looking at the net result of those analyses for their specific facility, and then applying the reduction that they gain by completing their site-specific, taking that same reduction and applying it to our hydraulic situation, we'll be able to fairly quickly know whether or not an actual site-specific analysis for our facility will actually benefit us in terms of the hydraulics.
Okay.
So that's the work that Bergman is going to do first. That has to be supported by an actual site-specific analysis. We can't, DEC will not take the fact that Sakandaga's watershed saw a 25% reduction in its design flood as a result of a site-specific analysis and just let us apply that 25% to Indian Lake. We would have to do a site-specific analysis for DEC to accept that request to lower it by 25%. But we can do, $20,000 worth of work to see whether or not it's even worth spending the money to justify that to DEC. And I think it's well worth that investment, because the alternative is we have an earthen embankment that will overtop as a result of the design flood. A spillway that's incapable of passing the flow requires us to expand that spillway in some way. So it's a significant amount of work, plus structural strengthening of the non-overflow structure. If we're able to bring that down, and if it's not a proportionate relationship, so if it's 25%, we're not talking about a reduction by 25% in the elevation or the flow. But if that flow and elevation come down significantly enough, we might be able to eliminate, and the hope is that we can eliminate some of that remediation that would otherwise be required.
Okay.
Okay. Very well articulated.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very well articulated. Thank you.
So I need a motion to accept the contract?
I'll make that motion based upon
Okay.
Mr.
Second?
Rosenthal,
discussion.
I'll second it.
Mr.
Any
Burns.
further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thanks.
Thank you.
This memorandum, does that go under a contract, or is that in,
That's the board's choice, I guess. But Rick told me that we could wait.
We could
till
do it
nine.
now.
Okay,
But if you
fine.
want to do it now.
You can do it now.
let's do it now.
this was given to us, we came in. It's funding and support for the Lewis County Soil and Water Conservation District, the Black River Gauging Station.
That's what they sent us yesterday by email.
I did send it out by email yesterday, and I provided a copy this morning. So the district has been working with Lewis County Soil and Water
I have
Conservation
one.
for about the last year, and ways to enhance the Black River water elevation or stage monitoring, which Lewis County Soil and Water conducts in the Black River watershed, particularly at Dadville and at their gauge site at Dadville. We focused on, these discussions have focused mainly on supporting Lewis County Soil and Water in some way, assisting them in ways to improve the river monitoring, which would benefit their local residents and provide notice of flood conditions and flood forecasting. You might recall back in September, I discussed how the staff had approached USGS and we were unsuccessful, and I think it coming to a feasible solution with USGS. They would require the district to install a USGS gauge site. It would basically eliminate the effort that Lewis County Soil and Water have been doing and would like to continue. So that just didn't all seem to be feasible. However, in November, staff started discussions with NOAA, National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, concerning the proposed enhancements to the Dadville gauge. And they were very receptive, and Nichelle Billhart at Lewis County Soil and Water thought it was a great idea. I got NOAA and Lewis County together, and it turns out it seems that it might only boil down to a IT information technology
Really?
solution to get their information. That's well underway. They fully expect to be able to integrate and upload with a little bit of effort by their IT folks the data. And the additional benefit that the district could provide, and in order to really enhance that Dadville site, the additional information would be related to the relationship between the elevation of the river and how much flow is actually in the river. Right now, Lewis County measures just the elevation.
Okay.
And in order to develop that relationship between stage and flow, there needs to be survey work. Survey work done in the river at various times, at various flows of the river, so that you can develop a rating curve, a relationship between stage and flow. And so staff is proposing that the district hire a qualified survey firm to complete that river field survey, including river flow and elevation measurements, and in order to produce a stage discharge rating curve, which Lewis County can use, and which NOAA will then be able to use with its a branch division of NOAA, which is the River Forecast Center. And the Northeast River Forecast Center will take that rating curve as well as other information it has available and actually put together a flood forecast for that location. So not only will the residents who are familiar with Lewis County Soil and Water, their website, and now the publishing of the real-time elevation, but they'll be able to also look at to NOAA to determine a day or 2 days out in advance what the stage will be, what the flow will be at that particular point. So it'll give, by us developing the rating curve, NOAA will be able to provide advance notice of floods and changes in stages. And I think that, at least with my discussions with Michelle, it seems to be something they're extremely interested in and would be very pleased to have as part of their system. So staff seeks board authorization to evaluate, select, and award the Black River rating curve field survey work to either qualified MBE, WBE, or Service disabled, thank you, veteran-owned business firm, and authorize the executive director to execute an agreement in an amount not to exceed $10,000.
Sounds like we're including a professional wrestling.
This will help us along, obviously, with some of our MWBE and SDB goals, but it would be a purchase without formal competitive bidding, and similar to some of the other MWBE procurements that we've made.
I'll make the motion.
If it,
Not to exceed. Go ahead.
if it pleases the board, I'll just recite a real quick resolution.
Go ahead.
So we don't do this as
That's
a
fine.
motion, which,
I have a quick question, though. If we authorize the survey, is this a courtesy to the Lewis County Soil and Water District, or is it part of our mandate to monitor?
Well, no,
the
it's
river?
not part of our mandate.
Okay, so it would be a courtesy.
This certainly is with
Would
the
help
intent
with water.
to benefit and enhance the Soil County Soil and Water District's effort and Lewis County's effort there.
So we're trying to all get on the same sheet of music with the county, with NOAA, with everyone else for flood control, warning, and the mitigation process sort of thing. So we're working with our partners to help them out.
Yeah, with just the pure operation of the reservoirs, the gauging that we're paying for at Boonville, which the district has been for decades, and the gauging in Watertown, both those gauges are the gauges we use to operate Old Forge, Six Lake, and Stillwater Reservoir. And beyond that, we don't specifically need additional gauges to properly operate and properly protect in terms of storage or monitor in terms of augmentation. So, yeah, this really is basically to enhance the Lewis County's effort on monitoring.
Go ahead.
real quick. Whereas the board desires to fund the Black River Gauging Station in Dadville in support of Lewis County Soil Water Conservation District, as detailed in the chief engineer's memo dated 12/9/16. And now therefore be it resolved, and I'll just recite the highlighted section of the memo. Staff seeks board authorization to evaluate, select, and award board river rating curve field survey work to a qualified MBE, WBE, SD, VOB firm, and authorization for the executive director to execute an agreement in the amount not to exceed $10,000.
I'll make that motion.
Second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So carried.
Christmas week.
Staff and committee reports. General Counsel, Mr. Gillespie.
My memo is on page 83. Nothing new yet on the Erie Boulevard suit before the U.S. Court of Appeals D.C. Circuit. Court's yet to schedule the oral argument, but we expect it soon. Next major thing was the Black River area apportionment, which the board took care of today. Myself, the chief engineer and executive director met with representatives of DEC to explore pathways to facilitate the use of DEC's lands or lands under DEC's jurisdiction adjacent to the Hawkinsville Dam. We hope to secure authority for the regulating district's contractor to utilize the land south of the Brea parcel for staging and access to the Brea parcel, and also for placement of the toe of the planned embankment. DC staff plans to explore the use of a concurrent use and occupancy agreement, and they will see if they have a stock plan for the construction of a walkway and dock or pier through which we can improve fishing access to their site. So ultimately, it may cost us a little bit of decking and maybe a walkway or sidewalk in order to pull this off, but it seems as though things are moving in the right direction. DEC is also looking to see if they have money to throw at that project.
Is it in their regulations?
Yes, they have money for that sort of thing. The question is, how excited are their fishery guys about that particular spot? On behalf of the Records Access Officer, responded to 2 FOIA requests since I drafted this report at the end of November. Just a heads up. And also, the Joint Commission on Public Ethics has promulgated guidelines and procedures regarding the designation of policymaking positions. It has always, up until this point, been the responsibility of council to decide who has to fill out the financial disclosure statement every year. For us, it was relatively simple to do so. JCO put together a set of regulations which made it even easier and basically confirmed what we had already determined.
Okay.
But there's now guidance behind the guess made by council in the past.
Okay.
That's my report. I'm ready
Any
to answer your
questions?
questions.
Compliance Officer, Vicki.
Thank you. My report can be found on page 84. Just a couple of things to highlight. Our current MWB spend is currently at $1,770 and change. Our year-to-date spend is 30.9%. Our SDVOB spend is currently at $1,007 and change. On pages 85, 86, and 7, you will find the contract status reports. Those are there for your review and satisfy the requirements of Public Authority Law, Section 2879. We had a meeting with Beth at IMC, the woman who did our website and is working on our new database. We went over some concerns, some things we thought we needed corrected, and some wishes to make things a little easier for Sue, who runs that program. I think we're in a good spot now. She's actually using the new program to run this year's renewals. So I think we got most of the kinks worked out. And we completed the 2016 nationwide cybersecurity review, which is an assessment we have to perform each year. Any questions? Not that concludes my report.
And I apologize, I should have noted, I don't know, she just had a recent loss, her passing of her father, and the board sends its condolences.
Thank you.
Chief Fiscal Officer, Mr. Ferraro.
Mr. Chairman, my report can be found on page 88 through 148. As always, I'll focus on the Fiscal Outlook highlights. Specifically, I'd like to focus on the independent audit, which we received an initial draft, which I reviewed. The only changes I made were to the management discussion and analysis items, which were basically just informational and had no impact on the nature of the audit. The audit continues to be an unqualified audit. I provided some copies to the board. I will, before the end of the week, provide Richard Levichin, the audit person from KBL, that my revisions are accurate, and that should generate a final before the end of the year, at which point we will get it loaded on the public authority reporting system, and we will have that behind us. And I will add to the January agenda a formal presentation of that audit for the January meeting. We're now basically through the assessment season, and the status as of today is we received the assessment from Saratoga County in the amount of $1,034,718. We also received on the federal Section 10F headwater benefit fees final payment for that group from Albany Engineering in the amount of $7,857. So the only thing that's left on the Hudson River area side is the assessment due from Rensselaer County in the amount of $542,477, which will be due next month. On the Black River area side, now that the board has passed the apportionment, we will be issuing those assessments this week to both the counties and the hydroelectric concerns. And as far as the payment terms, as we discussed, we will issue those invoices with a due date of March 31st, 2017. And I think that puts us in good shape there. And if the board has any other questions, I'd be more than happy to answer.
Any questions?
No.
Comments? Engineer, Mr. Fulton, again.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My report begins on page 149. Briefly in summary, in the Hudson River area, precip range from 76 to 83%, a historic average in the month of November. And Indian Lake and Great Sock and Iowa Lake, we had about 50% or so historic average inflow. We released at Conklinville and Indian Lake 36 and 13% of historic average, respectively. At Indian Lake in particular, we have, toward the end of the month, the beginning of December so far, have cut our releases back significantly to assist the town of Indian Lake during their reconstruction of Abenaki Dam, which is, in terms of Indian Lake, it's not really an issue at this point. We've got plenty of storage capacity, and we have been storing water during the last 3 weeks or so. They're hopeful that the town of Indian Lake, that they will have their construction done soon. And I have put them on notice at the town that I really did not want to run into January still storing water and be above our target curves and averages as much higher than we are currently. So they're hopeful that they'll have that work finished by the end of this week and be able to resume our releases. They're going to have to figure something out at the town because one way or the other, the water will come to them. And certainly would be better if we can control it over the course of several months. But
This is the year we'd have a major event.
well, that's the you always have to be prepared for that, so. So that's the reason why Indian Lake is about 5 feet above our target, about 2.8 feet above the historic average. Black River area, we had about 70 to 80% of precip. Reservoir releases at Stillwater, about 38% of historic. And, actually, the inflow is about 38% of historic. And generally, reservoirs are in pretty good position. Old Fort Six Lake, Fulton Chain, we're very close to historic average, within a half a foot of historic average. Great Sacandaga Lake, we're a little bit higher in Stillwater. And we've had some inflow. Sacandaga in particular, we had to cut back on our releases for a couple of days. We're limited in our releases at Sacandaga due to the natural flow in Hudson River. Again, consistent with the offer of settlement. So that put a little bit of water in the Great Sacandaga Lake, but nothing that was out of usual or normal operating. So I'll be glad to take any questions.
Again, any questions, comments? Anybody?
No, not right now.
Thank you.
Hudson River, Black River Administrator, Mr. Hodges?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our report starts on page 183. Update on the OTD Edwards encroachment in Mayfield. The remediation work has started. They pushed back the soils that they originally moved. So that's back in place. They were planning on hydro seeding. I didn't get a follow-up yet whether they did it or not because the snow came. But the rest of the work, if the hydro seeding didn't get done, they're doing it in the spring. And then it'll just be they'll still have to plant the trees and the shrubs and stuff like that, but I'm hoping by the summertime that that'll be back to where we expect it to be. Rip-rap around the Great Sacandaga Lake is ongoing. We placed approximately right now 450 ton of stone and armored 587-foot shoreline so far. The roof on the new garage is complete. The garage doors have been ordered, and we'll be putting those on hopefully in the next couple of weeks and starting our interior work for the winter. And we've established the property line at Stillwater Reservoir in North Dyke. FERC has required us to do some tree removal up there. So we had staff go up there to determine the private property district line, so we can cut trees on private property. And we'll start that work as soon as weather allows. That's all I have. I'll be glad to answer any questions anybody may have.
Again, any questions? Any additional board members' questions or comments? If not, resolution for our next regular board meeting, January 10th at the Northampton Town Hall in Northville.
When is it?
10th. Can we have a motion?
I'll move for that meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everybody.